Rizvi, UPSC English Literature faculty. So today we are going to go ahead with the fifth part of our restoration. For all my students, for the first time if you're watching me, then this is the entire series that I am running, and that is of the restoration period. So yes, you can catch up from the part 1. And today let's go ahead without any further delay to the part 5th of our series of the restoration to romanticism period. Over here you can look at the picture. That is a quintessential picture of the 17th, 18th century, right? All right, let's go ahead with it. So guys, now we talked a lot about novels, drama. Now we are coming to the critical aspect of the restoration period, criticism in literature, ancient practice. If we look at that, then ancient practice was writing about books and authors has existed since writing itself. So we all know that criticism, what is criticism? जब भी कोई नॉवल पोएट्री लिखता है, हम भी कोई अगर नॉवल पढ़ते हैं, पोएट्री पढ़ते हैं, तो हम लोग उसको पढ़ने के बाद उसने हम पे क्या असर किया है, क्या इम्पैक्ट किया है, यू नो व्हाट इज द, कैसे लिखा है, अच्छा लिखा है, बुरा लिखा है, ये हम लोग क्रिटिकली असेस करते हैं. हमेशा जब से टेक्स्ट आया है, पोएट्री है, तब से क्रिटिकल असेसमेंट आया है. वैसे ही लिटरेरी क्रिटिसिज्म एक फॉर्मल वे में बहुत स्टैब्लिश हुआ था इन द एरा ऑफ जॉन ड्राइडन, दैट इज इन द रेस्टोरेशन पीरियड. सो rise of the professional critic, as reading and writing expanded, as this profession expanded, so did the profession of critical expertise. So criticism also became a very serious profession. Early influences, extremely important, John Dryden ka of dramatic poesy, 1668, analyzed literary theory and form. So yes, this was one of the first literary critical texts that you could say of John Dryden that was published in the year 1668, and that analyzed critically that, you know, what these literary texts are, what these poems are, drama and all. Jonathan Swift, The Battle of the Books, satirized old versus new literature, and hence these texts too becomes important. French influence, Nicolas Boileau Art Poetic 1674 shaped literary standards in the Augustan age. You can look at this picture, a lot of literary critics standing over here, right? Next, you have role of criticism. What does criticism do? Criticism helps to define literature's purpose. कि literature का purpose क्या है? क्यों हम literature लिख रहे हैं? What is the purpose behind it? Second, I just adjust the screen a bit. Okay, I hope it's visible now to everyone. All right. So the role of criticism is basically to helps define literature's purpose, sets the taste, and it guides composition कि आगे के writers कैसे लिखे, वो guide भी करता है. Ever changing nature, criticism evolves as the text evolves, poetry evolves, drama evolves. So does criticism, but remains influential, though no critic is always right. Nobody is right. My perception about a drama, text, novel can be very different from your perception, your experience. Okay, so no critic is wrong, no critic is right. People's view on perfection in Essay on Criticism, Alexander Pope का जो work है in Essay on Criticism, that is again a literary text. Okay, Alexander Pope was that no piece of writing is ever perfect. Whoever thinks a faultless piece to see thinks what never was not is not ever shall be. So yes, this becomes kind of, you can say, the mantra of that period, that, you know, whoever is writing is not always right, and whoever he's not even wrong. Okay, so this role of criticism becomes an important one. Then you have Dr. Samuel Johnson. If we are coming towards the 18th century, guys, we see one of the major literary critic was Dr. Samuel Johnson. Dr. Samuel Johnson का 1755 में एक work आया था, and that was Dictionary of the English Language 1755, a monumental work that defined English words with wit and insight. So this was very important. उसके बाद इनका 1759 में एक work आया था, Rasselas Prince of Abyssinia, a philosophical novel exploring the choice of life. Okay, Rasselas इनका एक philosophical novel था. The Vanity of Human Wishes, a reflective poem on human ambition and fate, and Lives of the English Poets, a major literary work of criticism. He moved to London in the year 1737. He worked as a journalist, as a poet, and as a playwright, and he wrote an ironic defense of the 1737 Theatres Licensing Act. तो सब 1737 में थिएटर्स पे ताले लग गए थे, तो गवर्नमेंट ने इसको लॉक कर दिया था थिएटर्स को. तो डॉक्टर जॉनसन वाज वन ऑफ द फर्स्ट टू to say a no to that, to question it, okay? And Dr. Samuel Johnson, guys, one of the first major English critic. You can say the father of English criticism, John Dryden, but the one who was very important, the first major critic, and that is Dr. Samuel Johnson. Okay, so this becomes a very important one. You can look at this man over here. You can imagine him to be Samuel Johnson writing and doing his critical work. The dictionary. Now, talking about the dictionary, guys, you know, the one जो dictionaries लिखता है उसको कहते हैं lexicographer. So lexicographer होना एक बहुत बड़ी बात होती है, because dictionary writing, it's a very important thing, because of course searching for words, finding their meanings, their etymology, and so on. So dictionary written in 1755 took 9 years to complete, a very humongous task at the time when there was no internet, nothing at all. So more than just definition, they included literary quotes and cultural insights. So this is the reason कि इसमें quotes हैं, cultural insight है, that's why it makes it special and rich. Unlike the French Academy's fixed approach, it documented English as an evolving language and a foundation for later dictionaries like Oxford English Dictionary का foundational dictionary हो गई थी. Wit and satire, जैसे lexicographer, उसने कैसे लिखा था lexicographer के बारे में? A writer of dictionaries, a harmless drudge. Okay, so there was humor also. Oaths, a grain which in England is generally given to horses, but in so-called supports the people. Okay, so can you see the humor over here? And patron, commonly a wretch who supports with insolence and is paid with flattery. Patron वो होते थे जो कि artists को, writers को support करते थे with money. So this is his definition. So yes, his definition was not bland, but with humor, with satire. And this is the reason that this stands out among dictionaries that are written across the world. So Dr. Samuel Johnson, literary criticism and influence, his views. So Dr. Johnson का literary criticism कहाँ से बहुत ज़्यादा polish होके आया है? The first thing that he did was he gave views on a lot of aspects, on poetry, on drama, on novels. So when we talk about poetry, he gave a lot of emphasis on metaphysical poets. So metaphysical poets कौन थे? मैंने अपने रेनेसा क्लास में बताया है. और ओके गाइस, जस्ट लेट मी टेल यू कि जो रेनेसा पीरियड का जो मेरा क्लासेस हैं, वो एक चैनल है UPSC IAS, उसमें मेरा प्ले लिस्ट है, उसमें मेरे 5 लेक्चर्स हैं. ओके, सो बाद में मैं इस चैनल पे हम लोग का शिफ्ट हो गया, बिकॉज दिस इज पर्टिकुलरली ऑप्शनल काइंड CS सिविल सर्विसेज एग्जामिनेशन के लिए. And that one you can guys can whoever wants to look at those lectures of mine, you can see it in that channel. UPSC IAS का 5 lectures हैं, बाकी के सारे lectures यहाँ पर हैं. Anyways, so हाँ, उन lectures में मैंने metaphysical poets के बारे में बहुत बात की कि metaphysical poets कौन थे? John Donne, Thomas Carey, and Richard Lovelace, and so many. There were many metaphysical poets, and all these poets had a very different idea of writing. Okay, उनका जो writing था उसमें intellect था, उसमें wit था, unconventional poetry था. So Samuel Johnson criticized the use of forced comparisons. The most heterogeneous ideas are yoked by violence together. So उन्हीं ने जैसे कि सब पे रिमार्क किया था, जो अब्राहम कावले थे metaphysical poet, उसने क्रिटिसाइज किया था मेटाफिजिकल पोएट्स को, बोला था कि ये लोग अच्छा नहीं लिख रहे. बाद में जाके मेटाफिजिकल पोएट्स की बहुत ज़्यादा इनको बढ़ावा मिला था, स्पेशली T.S. Eliot ने 20th सेंचुरी में बहुत बढ़ावा दिया था. बट सैमुअल जॉनसन क्रिटिसाइज मेटाफिजिकल पोएट्स अ लॉट. ओके, so he criticized the use of forced comparison, but he appreciated universal imagery, the churchyard bounds with images which find a mirror in every mind, and defended Alexander Pope's poetic status. So उसने तो of course critics के हाथ में रहता है कि कौन से poet को आप बढ़ावा दे पाओ, कौन से poet को आप reduce कर पाओ. So this is a very huge responsibility, or you can say, you know, they have the opportunity to make sure that okay, this poet should be here, this novelist should be here, and you know उनका position decide कर सकते हैं. तो इतना ज़्यादा लोगों का you know एक you can say एक position हो जाती थी, legitimate position. So he was the one to put down metaphysical poets, and yes, Alexander Pope को उसने बहुत ही ज़्यादा praise किया था. Okay, then next we have impact of Johnson criticism. His work balanced harsh judgments with lasting literary insights. He was praised. He was praised a lot by T.S. Eliot in the 20th century for its coherence and depth, and he combined biography with literary analysis, setting a new standard. Notable critical opinions: he praised Shakespeare, प्रीफेस टू शेक्सपियर 1765 में इसने प्रीफेस टू शेक्सपियर लिखा था, एंड इसमें इसने प्रीफेस टू शेक्सपियर में जो इसने 1765 में लिखा था उसने प्रीफेस इसमें शेक्सपियर को बहुत प्रेज किया है. एंड ही डिसमिस्ड, as I told you, he can dismiss, he can accept, he can promote, he can celebrate a work, and he can also dismiss a work. So इसने लॉरेंस स्टर्न का थ्रिस्टम शैंडी को, जो कि एक बहुत ही अनकन्वेंशनल स्टाइल ऑफ नॉवल राइटिंग में लिखा गया, तो उसको बड़ा डिसमिस किया था. एंड ही अंडरवैल्यूड मिल्टन का लिसिडस, इवन जॉन मिल्टन का लिसिडस उसने बहुत अंडरवैल्यू किया था. एंड ही डिसलाइक जॉनथन स्विफ्ट, एंड दैट रिफ्लेक्टेड पर्सनल बायसेस इन क्रिटिसिज्म. ओके, सो यस, कहते हैं कि क्रिटिक्स जो होते हैं वो अपने पर्सनल बायसेस नहीं लाना चाहिए, बट somehow we are humans, we do bring our personal biases. So this happened during that time. Then next you have Boswell. Now who was Boswell? Boswell was the one who was all the time with Samuel Johnson, and this made him know Samuel Johnson so well that after his death he wrote a biography on Samuel Johnson, Dr. Samuel Johnson, that is लाइफ ऑफ जॉनसन. सो ये बहुत ही मशहूर बायोग्राफी है जो बॉसवेल ने लिखा है 1791 में आफ्टर द डेथ ऑफ जॉनसन. लाइफ ऑफ सैमुअल जॉनसन, अ लैंडमार्क बायोग्राफी कवरिंग 20+ years ऑफ जॉनसन्स लाइफ, रिच इन एनेक्डोट्स, छोटे छोटे किस्से हैं, बहुत मज़ेदार किस्से हैं, एंड इट शेप्ड मॉडर्न बायोग्राफिकल राइटिंग. सो येस, दिस स्टैंड्स एट द वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट वर्क. एनेक्डोट फ्रॉम अ जर्नल, anecdote from Journal of a Tour to the Hebrides. Lord Manbodo admired Johnson's appetite and conversation, and he compared himself to Romans, saying, happy to come, happy to depart. Okay, so all these are, some aspects from Johnson life wherein he was recorded, he was documented, because he was a very interesting figure. Okay, बहुत मज़ेदार figure थे ये, and this is the reason that his criticism also is important. Now we are coming to Lawrence Sterne and Tristram Shandy. Importance of digression. When we talk about novels of that period were the ones जो कि बहुत ही ज़्यादा increase पे था, rise पे था. Why? Because novel इससे पहले कभी भी genre establish नहीं हुआ था. पहले के टाइम पे पोइट्री चलता था, ड्रामा चलता था, बट नॉवेल्स नाउ. सो नॉवेल्स में जब आ रहे थे नॉवेल्स, तो दे पीपल वर एक्सपेरिमेंटिंग कि किस तरह हम लोग लिखे. तो लॉरेंस स्टर्न was one novelist who experimented with novel writing. And how was it? So importance of digression. So what did he do? That Sterne ने believe करता था कि जो भी मैं लिखूँ मैं अपने experiments ला सकता हूँ. तो Sterne believe digression. Digression मतलब क्या होता है? जैसे कहते हैं आप एक कहानी सुना रहे हो, उस कहानी में से आप दूसरी कहानी पे पहुँच गए, उस दूसरी कहानी से आप तीसरी कहानी में पहुँच गए, तो बड़ा डाइग्रेस कर जाते हो. सो Sterne believe कि डाइग्रेशन ना वर्क को इंटरेस्टिंग बनाते हैं, तो वो बहुत डाइग्रेशन यूज करता था. So Lawrence Sterne believed digressions were the sunshine, the life, and the soul of reading. And his novel, Tristram Shandy, is all about digression, and he breaks traditional storytelling rules. 18th century novels, evolution, early novelists like Aphra Behn, Daniel Defoe, Samuel Richardson, Henry Fielding, they all focused on realism and moralistic themes. Moralistic themes मतलब कि ये करना चाहिए, अच्छा ये बुरा है, and of course realism. By mid-century, humor, imagination, and emotion became more central. Fiction moved beyond strict time, place, and action, leading to new experimental forms. All right. Then next you have Sterne ka unique contribution. Now, why Lawrence Sterne was kind of looked down upon by Samuel Johnson, but his contribution is immense. Why is it immense? Because Tristram Shandy जो है उसका जो वर्क है जिसमें बहुत डाइग्रेशन यूज है, दैट पैरोडी नॉवेल्स कन्वेंशन. मतलब नॉवल जो सिंपल नॉवल होती थी उसका पैरोडी है, उसके डिफरेंट लिखा था उसने, मॉकिंग देयर स्ट्रक्चर एंड लॉजिक. सो ट्रिस्ट्रम शैंडी में स्ट्रक्चर कम था, लॉजिक कम था, तो उसने काइंड ऑफ मॉक किया है कन्वेंशनल वे ऑफ नॉवल राइटिंग. यूजेस नॉन लीनियर स्टोरी टेलिंग, कॉन्ट्रडिक्शंस एंड प्लेफुल लैंग्वेज. He anticipates stream of consciousness that was later developed by 20th century writers like James Joyce and Virginia Woolf. तो इसने काफ़ी जो stream of consciousness जो लिखा था, बाद में modern writers ने इस पे बहुत work किया stream of consciousness में. What is stream of consciousness? जहाँ पे आप अपने thoughts को बिना किसी रुकावट के बस flow करा रहे हो. Okay, there is no structure. It could be anything. Okay, so Virginia Woolf has written very, very wonderful work on that, and so has James Joyce. But Tristram Shandy in the 18th century was someone, okay, you can say was a pioneer of this. He directly engages the reader, breaking the fourth wall. Criticism versus influence. He was, yes, criticized by Johnson, Richardson, Goldsmith, But despite opposition, Tristram Shandy remains one of the most influential texts, okay, because of its unconventionality. Opening address to the reader, Sterne asks readers to be patient and let him tell the story his own way, and he encourages them to laugh with him or at him but remain engaged. So वो अपने लॉरेंस स्टर्न के ओपनिंग में बोलता है कि readers patient रहना, मेरी थोड़ी unconventional experimental novel telling है, and you laugh along the way because it's a funny work. Okay, so he has written all of this. Then next is Lawrence Sterne's innovation in novel writing, non-linear narrative. Okay, so Sterne was the first to use beginning, middle and end not necessary in that order. तो मतलब जैसे कि एक नॉवल में क्या होता है, एक बिगिनिंग होती है, एक मिडिल होता है, एक एंड होता है, नहीं, वो ऐसे में नहीं लिखता था, वो किसी भी ऑर्डर में लिखता था. एंड ट्रिस्ट्रम शैंडी स्टार्ट्स विद ट्रिस्ट्रम्स कंसेप्शन. फॉर इंस्टेंस ट्रिस्ट्रम शैंडी जो नॉवल है वो क्या स्टार्ट होता है कि कैसे ट्रिस्ट्रम कंसीव हुआ था, कैसे उस दुनिया में आया. हिज बर्थ हैपेंस इन वॉल्यूम 3, मतलब वॉल्यूम 1 में उसकी कहानी है, फिर वॉल्यूम 3 में बताया जाता है कैसे वो आया. बट द स्टोरी एंड्स 4 years बिफोर हिज बर्थ. ओके, सो यू कैन सी द नॉन लीनियर नरेटिव दैट ही यूज, एंड ही यूजेस डाइग्रेशन एंड tangents, making the plot more structured and very, very unstructured and unpredictable. Okay, so philosophical influences. He was inspired by John Locke's essay concerning human understanding and explores random association, the relativity of time and sensory experience. Okay, so yes, John Locke an essay concerning human understanding, philosophical work that was 1690 में आया था. Lawrence Sterne was very much inspired by that. Okay, then you have next revolutionizing narrative style. So unlike epistolary novels, जैसे epistolary novels जैसे Samuel Richardson, Henry Fielding epistolary novels लिख रहे थे. What is epistolary novels? letter के format में, like Dear Sarah, you know this was happening, something like that, you know, वो letter के format में लिख रहे थे. So unlike epistolary format like Richardson or omniscient narrators like Henry Fielding, Sterne narrator directly addresses the reader. Sterne जो है reader से बोलता है, Dear reader, you are going to read my novel is this, and he used to address it directly. His rambling thoughts, वो कुछ भी बोल रहा था, moved in all directions, past, present and up, so that is stream of consciousness, and he covers every subject, sex, science, war, noses, anything, everything covers without consistency or coherence, and his aim was to write a civil, nonsensical, good-humored Shandian book, and graphological experimentation. He uses visual elements to depict the difficulty of telling a story in a straight line, and one of the first to use typographical play. Typographical मतलब कि अपने पेजेस पे वो इस तरह से टाइप करता था कि कुछ शेप्स आते थे, कभी वो इस तरह से लिख रहा है. रियली अगर आप उसको लॉरेंस स्टर्न का ट्रिस्ट्रम शैंडी देखोगे तो इट्स अ very different typographical sort of novel writing. Okay, so that was Lawrence Sterne, very different from that age. A sentimental journey. Okay, 1767 में A Sentimental Journey, this was a unique travel narrative, and this features Parson Yorick from Tristram Shandy. Okay, so ये Lawrence Sterne का A Sentimental Journey Lawrence Sterne ने लिखा था 1767 में. इसमें एक कैरेक्टर है जिसका नाम है Parson Yorick, वो Tristram Shandy में भी था उस कैरेक्टर का. So it's supposed to be a travel journal but ends in Lyons, France without completing the journal. Parodies a fashionable travel logs. Rise of sentimentality in literature, and he uses the word sentimental ironically but also introduces a new emotional depth and paves the way for the cult of sensibility in late 18th century literature. So that was A Sentimental Journey, again written by 1767. That was by Lawrence Sterne. Next you have Tobias Smollett. Tobias Smollett was another novelist of that time, and he wrote in picaresque tradition. The outsider in English literature, you could say. Why? Because many British writers were outsiders observing society from a distance. So Tobias Smollett was basically, you can say, an outsider because uska jo critique tha British society mein, that was immense. That was very good. So he used to be an observer writing about the British society. Spencer and Swift wrote from exile in Ireland, though Swift never identified as Irish. Okay, so we have, so इसमें बस बताने कि कितने सारे लोग जैसे Spencer, Swift, all these were Irish people. English people नहीं थे, England में नहीं रहते थे, Ireland को belong करते थे. तो इनका observation Ireland के प्रति, Ireland की तरफ और ही different, England की तरफ और different होता था. जैसे if somebody comes from maybe Sri Lanka and they write, उनका perspective इंडिया के लिए अलग होगा rather than our perspective because they will be observing the society. उसी तरीके से लॉरेंस स्टर्न, though born in Ireland, was educated in Yorkshire, and the Anglo-Irish and Scottish literary tradition played a major role in English literature. So this is the reason बहुत सारे writers, they were able to write so well because they observed England from a distance. Now when you talk about Tobias Smollett, so Tobias Smollett ने picaresque novel निकाला था. What is picaresque novel? Picaresque novel was basically a kind of a novel जहाँ पे adventures बहुत ज़्यादा होते थे, experiences बहुत होते थे. For instance, कुछ भी character वो vagabond है, वो traveling के लिए निकल गया. That becomes a picaresque novel because travel पे आप जाओगे तो कितने adventures आएंगे. कभी भूख लग रही है तो खाना नहीं मिल रहा है, कैसे खाना मिला, and little anecdotes. वो टॉबियस स्मॉलेट बहुत ही ज़्यादा उसको रिफाइन किया था पिकारेस्क नॉवल को. एंड द पिकारेस्क नॉवल एंड स्मॉलेट्स हीरोज. पिकारेस्क novels follow a hero through misadventures or adventures, misadventures भी adventures भी, shaping their journey. So Tobias Smollett का picaresque characters come from all classes and social classes with servants playing a very major role. And his works include Roderick Random, बहुत famous work है Tobias Smollett का, a naval surgeon apprentice who endures battle, prison and despair. Peregrine Pickle satirized 1751 का work है, and that satirizes the aristocracy and the grand tour tradition. Ferdinand Count Fathom, another novel work, features one of literature's first true villains, Ferdinand Count Fathom. And Humphrey Clinker, another work, a structured epistolary novel focusing on society's moral and physical health. So yes, Tobias Smollett becomes another very important novelist of that period. So we have Lawrence Stern, we have Tobias Smollett. Smollett का जो style and themes थे, he combined satire, he combined realism, and he combined social commentary. And his vivid descriptions of suffering, war, and social injustice were completely groundbreaking. So yes, Tobias Smollett becomes very important when we talk about novels written in the 18th century and when novels were emerging as a distinct genre. Often composed to Daniel Defoe, Fielding and Stern, Smollett's picaresque tradition influenced later novelists in a very profound manner. Humphrey Clinker, a state of the nation novel, a state of the nation novel इसको बोलेंगे. So this was the first English novel to explore a family's quest for social harmony. Okay, so Humphrey Clinker, this first English novel to explore a family's quest for social harmony. मतलब कि हमें socially सुकून चाहिए, peace चाहिए, harmony चाहिए. So this was the first novel, Humphrey Clinker. Journey ends at Loch Lomond, Scotland, near Smollett's birthplace. So Smollett का ये वाला work again Scotland का था Smollett, तो उसने Scotland ही को अपने इसमें work में लाया था. And Humphrey Clinker में Scotland is at the height of its mercantile success and enlightenment, and it is portrayed in a very positive manner. So Tobias Smollett, belonging to Scotland, will of course project Scotland in a good manner. And England by contrast, appears chaotic, corrupt, and not harmonious at all, and very a lot of confusion. So that is your Humphrey Clinker, a state of the nation novel. Class, language and social commentary. This novel explores linguistic disparity, social judgments, and uses puns, wordplays, and union of the characters. So this all becomes another Humphrey Clinker, another work that is important of the 18th century era. Smollett का non-fiction works. अगर हम लोग Smollett का non-fiction, Tobias Smollett का non-fiction works देखें, so we have Complete History of England 1757 to 1758. Controversial but financially successful. The Present State of All Nations. Okay, these are all non-fiction works, guys. मतलब factual work है ये सारा. A broad and complex historical study influenced by Rabelais, a satirical tradition of bodily humor. The tradition of bawdy literature. 18th century was also suppressed. 18th century England suppressed open sexual expression, unlike Chaucer, Shakespeare, and Donne. Smollett, like Burns, kept earthly humor alive as social critique, and Restoration drama faced criticism for its sexual openness. So yes, कैसे body literature, मतलब explicit way में जो vulgarity project हो रही थी, चाहे वो novel में हो, drama में हो, सब कुछ control किया जाता. मतलब writers के पास इतना ज़्यादा freedom नहीं था कि वो कुछ भी लिखें. Okay, so a lot of things were controlled, unlike the time it was in Shakespeare. Okay, Shakespeare के time में, and in the time of John Donne, you will see explicit imagery is being used. There is, आराम से stage पे performances हो रहे हैं, which were very sexual innuendos were there, but nothing was allowed during this period. Then you have next the sexual themes in 18th century fiction. अगर हम देखें, so Roderick Random 1748 में includes a humorous reference to homosexuality, citing Petronius. So yes, there were some references. For instance, there was a homosexual reference. Roderick Random में Fanny Hill, जो John Cleland की थी. This was a highly detailed erotic novel banned for indecency, but it was a bestseller again. So this was republished in the 1960s. Okay, so Fanny Hill by John Cleland, इसको ban कर दिया गया था, लेकिन फिर से ये आगे थे. It was very famous, ban थी, but still it was very famous. Sensibility versus satire, the shift in fiction. So guys, there was a very strong shift in fiction when it comes to novel writing, and that was from sensibility to satire. So 1771, a pivotal year with publication of some of the most important works like Humphrey Clinker by Thomas Smaller. Why? Because it was a very satirical masterpiece. Humphrey Clinker को consider किया जाता है, and this actually made it a very this marked a shift in novel writing from sensible writing to something that was more satirical. The Man of Feeling by Henry Mackenzie was again a novel of extreme sensibility. Okay, so these novels were very popular during that time. So Mackenzie ka hero. So guys, if we talk about Mackenzie, so Henry Mackenzie का जो Man of Feeling में again a very sentimental novel. तो बहुत sentimental novel थी, and इसको sentimental literature का सबसे बहुत important work कहते हैं. And like Humphrey Clinker, which was satirical. So a man who cries, representing the rise of emotional introspection in fiction, and the novel romanticizes suffering and moral purity, contrasting with Smollett ka realism. Very different. Example scene: Harley meets a mentally ill woman in a madhouse. She gives him a ring, then leaves, and Harley weeps in pity, a hallmark of sensibility literature. So a lot of sensibility literature was this. Key takeaways from this slide, guys. Smollett ka Humphrey Clinker uses satire, humor, and realism to critique society. Henry Mackenzie ka The Man of Feeling marks a rise of sentimental fiction, emphasizing deep emotional responses, and 18th century fiction balance wit, satire, and sentiment, shaping later literary movements. So guys, with this, I'm coming to the end of this lesson. Very soon, I will be bringing the sixth and the last restoration period ka jo part hoga. We have 6 parts to restoration to romanticism, and then we will be moving ahead to romantic literature. So guys, with this, I am coming to an end. I hope to see you in my next class. And whoever wants to go ahead with the paid classes, जिसमें मैं पूरा UPSC English literature का syllabus cover कर रही हूँ, from all the, in a very detailed manner, चाहे वो novels हो, poetry हो, drama हो, you guys can go ahead, purchase the course, because and the description link is given in the